Everybody,
Oh,
as well it should be. As well it should be. Hello, everybody. My name is Beverly Mickens, and I'm the creator and founder, along with Donna Allen Figueroa and Tony Figueroa and Dan Farron of the Story Salon. That's where you is, and also that's where you at. So happy that you were here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry, I just want to do something. Okay. I am very grateful you're here tonight. Thank you always for coming. She's, we've been doing this what seems like forever. I think it's only been about 10 months. And it is just, it fills my heart in ways I can't tell you because sometimes it just seems like we're doing this in the void. But it means so much that I look on Zoom and I see people's happy faces. You decided to come. You don't have to be here. You could be watching Breaking Bad again for the third time, but you're here tonight. That's the amazing thing. So thank you. And we will be doing videos and telling you later that we will plan to meet in June. So, oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you. We will be together again. And I'll have to wear something else besides my dog walking pants and a dirty t-shirt. I'll actually have to show up in a dress and makeup, which will probably make me really happy. But in the meantime, we have a terrific show tonight. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you so, so much for still supporting the Story Salon. And, every month we do a theme. And tonight's theme is I was so naive. And I think that's what you have to say. Your eyes kind of have to roll back in your head. I was so naive. That is our theme for tonight. Oh, and before we start, though, even more importantly than anything else, we have to have like a huge freaking shout out for our social media person who does all and everything brilliantly, Miss Amber Greenberg. Amber Greenberg. Yay. Yay. And her fabulousness, just her general fabulousness. So thank you so much, Amber. And we have just like a really terrific roster of storytellers tonight. Some people who you have not seen in a very long time. Some people who are kind of regular, and everything in between. So I am very grateful that all these people, when I call them, say, "Yeah, what the hell? I'll do a story," and show up and make this show good. And I want everyone to know that they make this show exceptionally terrific. So very cool. And we are going to start with a woman. Let me tell you how this came about. Ellen and I were just sitting regular, happy as Larry. We're sitting at this little coffee shop, and this is just recently, and we're talking. And I don't even know how we get into it, but she tells me this story um, about sort of how naive she was about this particular thing. And when somebody's telling me a story, my mind starts clicking, and I thought to myself, "Oh my God, that'd be a terrific theme." So she was the one who originated this theme, and I think her story was perfect. I love this woman, Miss Ellen Switkes, ooh la la, delightful, superb storyteller. So please welcome her. Shout out to Miss Ellen Switkes.
thank you,
Woohoo!
Beverly. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for being here. So, Jay Leno used to say the difference between men and women was the Three Stooges. Men liked the Stooges and women didn't. That certainly rang true for me. My kid brother loved the Stooges. He'd roar with laughter every time someone got poked in the eye or kicked in the butt, but not me. I never enjoyed the antics of Curly, Larry, and Moe. Plus, I confused them with the Pep Boys, Manny, Moe, and Jack. Were all men the same person? I just couldn't keep it straight. But I was crystal clear about my favorite TV show, Girl Talk. Girl Talk with Virginia Graham. Virginia had a helmet. Yes, yes. She had a helmet of blonde hair coated in hairspray and epoxy. She ruled the roost back when women wore brooches. I wore a brooch today, so you know what that is. Her hands were perfectly manicured, designer fingers created to pluck chocolates from a candy dish. She and her guests, frequently a young Joan Rivers, would be ever so entertaining, chatting about life's non-essentials. Imagine my thrill years later when I was hired to be a booker on The Late Show starring Joan Rivers. This show launched the Fox network in 1986, and it created an epic rift between Joan and her mentor, Johnny Carson. My job was finding the right guests for Joan. And since I've been watching her for years, I knew who would click. With laser-like precision, I decided my first booking for Joan would be the legendary Howard Cosell. Hollywood celebrities surround themselves with armies of publicists. They need gargoyles to guard their gates. But I had a hunch that Howard Cosell guarded his own gate, and I was right. On the second ring, he answered his own phone. With his gruff, gravelly voice, he took care of business. Within 2 minutes, he agreed to do the show the following Tuesday. I promptly took a victory lap around the office, and then I went to lunch.
Yeah.
Providence was smiling on me. 2 hours later, Howard Cosell canceled. Wait, what? Immediately, I phoned him, and he read me the riot act. No way will he subject himself to a pre-interview with that moronic producer, and he doesn't memorize anything. Wait, what? Mr. Cosell, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and I will call you right back. That's when the head of the booking department let me in on a dirty little secret. Joan's talk show was scripted from start to finish through the pre-interview. Joan memorized her questions for the guests, and the guests were expected to memorize their answers for Joan. Improvisation and surprises were discouraged. Guests had better toe the line. Wait, what? I thought conversation on talk shows was spontaneous. I didn't know it was all rehearsed. Well, the powers that be made an exception for Howard Cosell. I called it back. I promised no pre-interview, no memorization, just do the show, be your usual fabulous self. Okay, he was back on board. Tuesday night rolled around. Howard Cosell arrived at the studio. I escorted him to makeup, sat with him in the green room, and apologized repeatedly for all this pre-interview nonsense. Who ever heard of such a thing, Mr. Cosell? I mean, you're a pro among pros. All I ask, please put Joan at ease. And he did. He was brilliant. Joan was not a sports aficionado. Isn't that a big surprise? But with Howard Cosell, she didn't need to be. He interviewed himself. At the close of the interview, he gallantly kissed her hand and said, "Leave Edgar, run away with me." After the show, I walked him to his limo. I apologized yet again for the pre-interview fiasco. I thanked him for doing the show. He took my hand, stared me straight in the eye, and said, this is verbatim, "Ellen Switkes, you are pathetically naive." Why do you say that, Mr. Cosell? He rolled his eyes, slipped into his limo, and drove away. Howard Cosell was my first and last A-list celebrity booking. From there on in, I booked only the civilians. Civilians were the regular people, the eccentrics, the people who were interesting in some peculiar way. These unknowns willingly consented to pre-interviews. They were so eager to be on a talk show, they would have consented to pre-colonoscopies. But for me, talk shows had lost their magic. Once The Late Show starring Joan Rivers was canceled, I never worked in television again. The thrill was gone. The bloom was off the rose. Howard Cosell was right. I am pathetically naive.
Oh, Ellen Switkes, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my God. No, no, you were not. You were so not pathetically. See, this is why you have to actually really watch the Three Stooges, because then, you know, when something like Howard Cosell happens to you, you just hit him in the head with a hammer.
Good advice. Thank you.
See, that's the Three Stooges come in good for something, you know? Just because I wanted to see Howard Cosell go, ow, look. You were not pathetic nor naive. And besides, Howard Cosell is dead now. You're alive and fabulous. So there. So there, Howard Cosell. And he took the money, I want to add.
Yeah.
Yeah. No class. Anyway, we shall continue this with a man who I do not see enough. And I'm hoping, we were talking a couple of weeks ago about the joy and the anticipation of actually getting together again at our own little special place, the art parlor, and how we'll just embrace each other for weeks upon end, just to be together again, to tell stories. And this man is one of the most captivating and wonderful storytellers, always terrific, Mr. Barry Segal.
Got it. Can you hear me now? Thank you, Beverly. This story is in memory of a good friend of mine, Eddie, who passed away several weeks ago. The story is called Somewhere Between Elephant Jokes and the F Word. My friend Eddie loved to tell jokes, corny jokes, funny jokes, blue jokes, inappropriate jokes, didn't matter. And Eddie was always committed to his material. So no matter how bad the joke was, when Eddie told it, it was funny. Made even funnier by his booming laugh that accompanied every punchline. I met Eddie almost 30 years ago at a Bang Your Drum, Run in the Woods Naked men's conference. We discovered that we had a lot in common, not least of which was that we were both trained in the arts and trying to make it in the business world. So after the weekend, Eddie invited me to join his networking group, which I did, and we became friends. We would talk on the phone every once in a while, and he would always open the conversation before he even said hello by telling me a joke. Then he would ask how old my daughter was, and he would tell me a joke that was age appropriate for her that I could tell her after the meeting, after the phone call. We started when JJ was in kindergarten with knock knock jokes. Knock knock, who's there? Interrupting cow, interrupting moo. We went through moron jokes, crossing the road jokes, your mama jokes, blonde jokes. Why did the blonde put lipstick on her forehead? She wanted to make up her mind. Well, I hadn't talked to Eddie for a while, and I called him one day, and of course he told me a joke, and then he asked me, how old is your daughter now? I said, can you believe it? She's 14. He said, I can't believe that. 14, we agreed, was a difficult age for jokes. He said, let me try this one. Why did the elephant paint his toenails red? So he could hide in the cherry tree. When I groaned, Eddie said, have you ever seen an elephant hiding in a cherry tree? See? I said, I think she's a little too old for elephant jokes. Try something else. So he told me a few jokes that were way off color and inappropriate for her. And I said, I don't think those are right for her. And Eddie, who had raised two boys through teenage years and into adulthood, just laughed at my innocence and laughed at the fact that I was so naive about what a 14-year-old really knows. So to push my buttons a little, he said, how about this one? He said, it seems Mickey and Minnie were having relationship problems. Mickey thought Minnie was fucking goofy. I tried to imagine myself telling JJ that joke. I said, I don't think so. And then I remembered a joke she brought home recently during the Tiger Woods infidelity scandal. She said, Dad, I have a joke about Tiger Woods. It's a little inappropriate. I said, all right. She said, what did Tiger Woods ask Santa for Christmas? Then impishly, she smiled and delivered the punchline, ho, ho, ho. Now, I don't know if she understood the joke, but I assume she did. And I didn't ask her. So I tried to think of myself telling her the Minnie and Mickey joke. I knew that if I told her that Eddie had told me an inappropriate joke with the F word in it, that she would beg me to tell the joke. But what if she didn't get it? Then I would have to explain the joke to her. The fact that goofy can be both a noun or an adjective, and that the F word can be an adjective, a verb, or an adverb. And it's the juxtaposition of all those that create the humor, which just seemed like a lot of fucking work for a goofy joke. So I asked Eddie for another joke. What we need, he said, is something between the F word and elephant jokes. And as soon as those words came out of his mouth, I knew that's exactly where JJ was in her life, somewhere between elephant jokes and the F word. Not a child any longer, but not an adult, or sometimes a child and sometimes an adult. I also realized that Eddie had given me a great title for a story. A few days later, I came home and JJ was watching TV. She was watching two shows at the same time, on one and switching back and forth between them. On one channel, she had The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, a Disney sitcom for tweens that she had outgrown, but she still liked to watch. And on the other channel, she was watching Dr. House, an episode in which he had a patient who was pregnant but had never had sex. Apparently, she had a rare form of somnambulism, and she got up in the middle of the night, walked next door to her neighbor, got in bed with him. They did goofy stuff, and she didn't remember it in the morning. I said to her, JJ, is this really appropriate for you to watch? She rolled her eyes at me and said, Dad, that's what teenagers like, stuff that's inappropriate. In the years that followed, we watched Orange is the New Black together. The first episode we watched had nudity, heterosexual sex, lesbian sex, drugs, violence, and foul language. After the show, we agreed we could watch it together as long as we didn't have to talk about it. Listening to rap songs with lyrics that were totally inappropriate, and I pretended not to listen. I pretended not to notice. And then from time to time, she tells me jokes, some of them completely inappropriate. And when she does, I always think, I've got to tell that joke to Eddie.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, my brother.
Barry Segal, everybody. Oh, that was so sweet. Thank you, Barry. And I like we go from PG to rated X all in one story. Thank you. Thank you. I long, my dad is still around. He's 93, and I long to be able to tell one of those jokes to him, but maybe I'll wait till he's 94. 94, generally, they can handle it by then. Thank you, Barry. I'm going to bring up somebody who, God, Ashton has always been so wonderful, because when we could meet before at the art parlor, she was there on a regular basis, just being part of the audience, which is just, I really always so grateful for that. People just showing up and saying, I want to listen, and I'm here. My presence is here.
Yes.
Yes, so I really have always done that. And she's done a couple of stories at the salon. And when I thought about this theme, I thought, and I actually did do that. I went, I bet she has something good. It's true. And she does. She is splendid. She is bright. And she is wonderful. So please welcome her, Miss Ashton Cynthia Clarke.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, folks, I was such a good girl. I was a smart, artistic kid who got excellent grades and never gave my parents any trouble. I hung with a group of brainiac girls just like me. I was the kid who was so naive. My idea of a house party was a little soiree my girlfriends and I threw when we hosted our 9th grade graduation. When I mixed egg salad with Miracle Whip and paprika, and another girl made what she boasted was deli quality chopped liver. Oh, there were no boys at our party. Our special guest was our homeroom teacher, and she brought her husband with her. Nothing even remotely connected with sex was ever uttered in my household until I was about 13 years old. And not the big talk, just the one about the mechanics of becoming a young lady, you know, my monthly visitor, And only then, because the school's hygiene teacher had sent every girl home with a pamphlet. At the end of our conversation, my mom whispered, "And when you're 16, I'll tell you where babies come from."
Ah.
She seemed so excited. I didn't want to disappoint her, so I didn't reveal that I had already learned that in biology class. But by the time I got to high school, I was tired of being square and dry as shredded wheat cereal. I mean, the world outside was changing. I pored over Life magazine with its in-depth articles and photos of hippies and in San Francisco. And I wrote romantic, yet chaste letters to an imaginary boyfriend, a soldier in Vietnam. But I was ready to break out for real. Then in my junior year, I was selected for a summer program at an Ivy League university. This would be a first for me, spending any time away from my parents' home in New York, 8 weeks on a college campus, a 5-hour bus ride from home, with no parental supervision. This would be my personal Woodstock. Now, about 2 weeks into the summer came my 16th birthday. There was a real party going on, dancing and everything else. And suddenly I noticed the boy, and the boy noticed me. Lamont was tall, hailed from Philadelphia, and was entering college as a pre-law student. He was almost 2 years older than me, and so mature, I thought. He looked down at me and smiled the whitest smile I had ever seen. For the next month, we were holding hands, taking long walks on campus, and revealing our deepest secrets. And then one day, Lamont stopped by my dorm room. I had my stereo playing. Bright yellow globules were rising and falling inside my new lava lamp. "Would you like to sit on my lap?" Lamont invited. I was nervous and I hesitated, but he smiled that perfect smile and I felt safe. Minutes later, I was being kissed by a boy for the first time. Carole King was singing and I felt my earth move. I mean, the kiss was everything I had fantasized about in one of my stories. And then, looking at me with beautiful, sincere eyes, Lamont whispered, "Can we go all the way?" What? I was appalled. No, disgusted. "I can't," I cried. But he challenged me. "What, you think you have to be married?" I did. But I mean, was that old fashioned? What with all the free love going on in San Francisco? I didn't want to seem like a total child, but all the coolness just ran out of me. And I saw myself, the girl who made her mom's recipe egg salad. Not married, but I think you have to be in love. And then he said the words I'd never heard in real life. "I love you, Cynthia." Without really knowing what I was saying, I blurted out, "Then I love you too." Then I waited for the tender follow-up. But what I heard was, "So, do you want me to use a Trojan?" What does he mean by Trojan? I mean, I was screaming in my mind. All I knew were the soldiers from the Iliad. I mean, strong soldiers. Did Lamont mean some kind of implement to help pry? But out loud, I was crying, "No, no." Lamont eased me off his lap then. He did sit quietly next to me until I was done crying. And then he left my room. He had come and gone in less than 30 minutes. But I was a wreck. I needed to talk to someone, but who? I mean, my new cool college girlfriends? But maybe even worse than what had just happened was the thought that they'd know I wasn't down and hip. And none of my friends back home knew anything about boys. I thought about calling my mom. I mean, I was 16. I needed her. I needed that talk she promised. So what that I knew the mechanics? what I needed to hear was feelings,
Scary.
emotions. But I didn't want her to panic. I mean, imagine the humiliation if she and my father made me come home. So I'd have to get through this on my own. I washed my face, changed, and padded barefoot down the hall to the study hall. There, a huge unabridged dictionary sat on a pedestal in the middle of the room. So I furiously flipped through the pages, and there it was. Trojan, of or pertaining to Troy, as in Trojan horse. Well, I knew that, but what the heck did that have to do with Lamont's question? What did that have to do with sex? In the cafeteria the next day, Lamont didn't even look at me, and I knew the romance was over. 2 weeks later, I was glad to be back on the Greyhound bus for home. And I was proud to show my parents my A in the Psychology 101 class, but I never told anyone about anything else that happened that summer.
Yeah, now we all know.
What I thought was going to be the greatest time of my life became a dark secret. 15 minutes on the lap of a boy who just wanted to use some kind of foreign apparatus on me. A couple of years later, I'm expecting my monthly visit from Aunt Flo and shopping what I call the ladies' personal paper products aisle at the neighborhood drugstore. And for the first time, displayed right on the adjacent shelves were boxes and boxes emblazoned with the name Trojan. Carole King crooning, the lava lamp, it all came rushing back. So I studied the box. And this time, when I retreated to my dictionary, I had more to go on. And there it was, prophylactic. That's what Lamont meant. Thanks to biology class and hygiene class and my trusted unabridged dictionary, I knew the mechanics and I knew the basics. But what about the feelings that had surfaced and the choices to be made and the lines I shouldn't cross or would cross? So here I am today, a few boyfriends and 2 husbands later. But it still hurts that my mom and I never had that talk. Thanks.
Oh, oh my gosh. Ashton Cynthia Clarke, thank you so much. Oh, that was so sweet. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I want to say to Lamont, the only lap I've been on is Santa's. Please do this. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, that's very sweet. And who knew Trojans had nothing to do with Greek mythology? I'm still shocked. I'm still shocked. You know who could have told us? JJ, Barry Siegel's daughter.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you
you.
so much. By the way, I just wanted to mention to people, I know it's easy on Zoom, but make sure you mute yourself because we want to be able to listen to our storytellers as clearly as possible. And this next man who I've not been able to bring up for, well, since I think even before the pandemic. I happened to see him in the dog park a couple of weeks ago, and I was very happy that he agreed to do this, his story tonight. For I was so naive because I knew Dylan would have something like superb because he is in the flesh, the art of storytelling. Nothing better than listening to Mr. Dylan Brody.
Thank you very much, Beverly. That was a lovely introduction. You know, we ran into each other at the dog park and I thought, oh yes, Story Salon. I've been getting ready for a gig up north where I'm a comic and I have to do the 4-to-1 laugh per minute ratio, non-stop witty, and you don't really get to indulge in the imagery. And I started to think back on the naivete that came with my youth and where I really felt I was most affected by it, and I have had 9 stories that I've thought of telling since that conversation. The decision was made as I listened to Switkes this evening. Ellen Switkes, who booked for Joan Rivers. One of my writing gigs was Joan Rivers. I had lunch with Joan Rivers at the Source, the place where Woody Allen and Diane Keaton broke up in Annie Hall, and a man came up to Joan. It was the first meeting I had with her, and he said, "You're Joan Rivers, aren't you? I got a joke for you, and I'm trying to get a job as a joke writer." And she said, "What do you got?" And the guy tells her a joke. She said, "That's pretty funny. Did you come up with that yourself?" He said, "Yeah, I did." She wrote a check for him. She ripped it out of her checkbook. She handed it to him. She said, "Congratulations, you're a professional." Several years later, after I had worked for her and been made deeply miserable, I was in Las Vegas for a gig of my own, and she knew I was there, and she invited me to come see her at the big showroom in the other hotel, because was more important than I. And I went in and I saw her, and I did not understand that as much as I was awed by her and delighted that she had invited me, she was seeking to be awe-striking and beloved. And I sat down with her in a booth after the show in the vinyl sticky seats. We sat together, and someone came up to her and said, "You're Joan Rivers, aren't you? I saw your show tonight. You're terrific." And she said, "Yes, I am." I said, "I got a joke you can use." She said, "Did you come up with it yourself?" He said, "Yes, I did. Just tell me." He told her. She wrote him a check. She handed it to him. She said, "Congratulations, now you're a professional." I said, "How many of those do you do every year?" And she said, "I don't know. I have a special account that's just for those." And then very quietly, almost as though we were conspiring to commit a crime, she said, "They almost never cash them." But that's not the story I'm going to tell tonight. I was, 22 years old. I had moved to Los Angeles as a regular at the Improv in New York, and now I was in Los Angeles finding out that I was not a regular at the Improv in Los Angeles. And I spent some time living on the roof of the Comedy Store, where I answered the phone for not enough to rent an apartment. I slept in a little space up there on the roof that I thought was perfect and comfortable and a lovely place to live in a warm place like Los Angeles, and only discovered on one very rainy night that in fact it was designed to steer rainwater away from an entrance. So from then on rainy nights, I snuck inside the club before it locked up, and I would sleep on a booth bench in the belly room, not the main room, because I had so thoroughly internalized that club's psychotic power structure that even as a vagabond, I didn't feel I could work the main room. And one night a woman told me that I was funny after a show. She told me I was funny, and she offered me cocaine. She invited me to her beautiful home in the Hollywood Hills, where I had sex with her and her boyfriend. And then afterwards, as I walked the winding Hollywood Hills road back down to my little rain gutter rooftop depression, I was very proud of myself, because she had said I was funny, and I was on a lot of cocaine. It wasn't until many years later that it occurred to me that I had been homeless and a prostitute. And I got myself on a list because I was answering the phones when somebody called who was the booking agent for the booking agent of The Tonight Show. Could Mitzi send over the names of 4 up-and-coming comedians that Macaulay might look at in his office for spots on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson? So I got the list from Mitzi and I added my name to the list. And I had my shot. And I walked into Macaulay's office, the legendary booker of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and I walked in with 7 minutes that I knew was crushing when I worked it in the clubs, and I performed it for him, and twice, as I performed for him in his office one-on-one, he said, "Huh." So I felt I was crushing. And then I was finished with jokes, and he was looking down at his desk and he was making notes, and for all I know, he was picking dates. But I was so naive and so fearful and so desperate for someone to tell me I was okay. I said, well, am I ready? And Macaulay, whose job it was to find reasons to say no to people 1,000 times a week, looked up at me and said, oh, I see. When you know you're ready, get back to me. It's good to meet you. Eventually, you have to decide. You run your world, you choose your life. You don't wait for someone to tell you you're ready. And you take what you can learn from the moments when you were just so naive. Thank you guys for having me on the show. I love Story Salon. I love you, Beverly, for making this happen. Good night, people.
Thank you, Mr. Dylan Brody. Thank you. And I dug the music too. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring up somebody who is quite beloved here at the Story Salon. You know it, he knows it. Let's be honest. The man is he's enthralling. He is mesmerizing. We clutch him to our bosom on a regular basis. That's how much love there is. The storytelling coolness of Mr. Mike Lambert.
Thank you. I just preface this by saying the pandemic has definitely changed me, and it impelled me to rewrite a letter I wrote a while back to Mary Baker Eddy. And for those of you who don't know my history, I spent many years and the entirety of my childhood trying to be a good Christian Scientist for Mary Baker Eddy. So, dear Mrs. Eddy, this was written in, this is like May 26, 1966, sort of. There's something very wrong going on at Berkeley Hall School. Berkeley Hall School is a school for only Christian Scientists, good Christian Scientists. I hardly know where to begin. I think it started in 5th grade at Dupar's restaurant, when the entire male population of the class, all 12 of us, were having dinner after our trip to Gilligan's Island for David Johnson's birthday party. And Davy Laverty wrapped that long string of red licorice around his penis. Yes, his penis, Mrs. Eddy, I don't know how else to say it. When he wrapped it around his penis 2 times and twirled it around under the table. The licorice, that is. Although one can only guess what Davy did for an encore. I really didn't think twice about Davy Laverty's antics at Dupar's at the time, or even afterwards. I certainly wasn't concerned. I knew that Davy's family were really good Christian Scientists, his grandmother especially. She has a goiter the size of a grapefruit coming out of her neck and hasn't gone to the doctor one time. She is so spiritual. And even this year, at the start of 6th grade, when I spent the night at Danny's house, and as we were getting ready for bed, he showed me another neat trick he'd learned, also involving what I was beginning to see was his favorite body part. And let me tell you, Mrs. Eddy, without going into too much detail, this one was a real showstopper. Kind of like a science experiment and a magic trick, all rolled up in one. I was speechless. But even then, I didn't think much of it. But now that we are nearing the end of 6th grade, Mrs. Eddy, things seem to be spinning out of control. It started during noon recess one day in March, right after Easter vacation. Davy Laverty and I were playing tag along with 5 or 6 other boys in the class. And someone got the idea that it might be fun, instead of tagging each other with our hands on the back or the arm or the leg. And I apologize for mentioning all these body parts, because I do realize the body is only an illusion of the material senses, and that a proper understanding of God as spirit and man as his spiritual manifestation can overcome it. But someone got the idea that instead of tagging and saying you're it, we should grab each other by the Well, by the illusion commonly referred to as balls, Mrs. Eddy, and not just to grab them, but at the same time to yell with frenzied glee, "Gumba!" kind of a victory cry. Now, this seemed like a very strange game to me indeed, possibly even a dangerous one, even if I was playing it with boys from some of the finest Christian Science families you'd ever want to know. I even asked Donald McCluskey, whose mother is first reader at the Christian Science Church in Westwood, where Ginger Rogers goes. Well, I asked him whether it was okay for us to be doing this in broad daylight and at Berkeley Hall School. I mean, weren't we supposed to be setting an example? And he said, an example of what? And I said, well, that man is spiritual and not material. And he said, everyone's playing it these days, even the public school kids. That didn't reassure me at all, because everyone knows only juvenile delinquents go to public school. Then Donald said that the whole Gumba concept came from an article in National Geographic called Rites of Passage. Well, that was good enough for me. I mean, let's face it, next to the Christian Science Monitor, National Geographic is about as spiritual as it gets. I went all in on Gumba, Mrs. Eddy. I think we all did. Then a few weeks later, during a particularly spirited game, Mrs. O'Connor, the 9th grade algebra teacher, walked by, just as Dave Laverty Gumba Jacob Wingrad in a backhand maneuver that was really one for the record books. Well, she was not impressed at all. "What are you doing?" she screamed at us. I'd never seen anyone that angry, even my older sister, Marilyn Heidi, and that's saying something. She goes to public school, so you can only imagine. Recess ended and we all went up to Mrs. Richards' art room for art class. I'd been working on a clay model of a koala bear in a eucalyptus tree, but it kept coming out looking like Billy Mooney in Lost in Space. Then all of a sudden, Mrs. Swan from the principal's office came in and handed Mrs. Richards a slip of paper and then left. And I saw Mrs. Richards go up to Dave Laverty and whisper something in his ear, and Danny put his art materials away and left. Then she whispered into Donald's ear and he left. I figured Jacob would be next, but she walked right past him and came up to me and told me to put away my things and go to Mr. Nelson's office. Davy and Donald and I walked slowly and silently the whole length of the track field along the driveway that led to Mr. Nelson's office. I'd never been sent there before, not in all my years at Berkeley Hall. I was terrified, I don't mind telling you, Mrs. Eddy. I'd always been the good kid. A's and O's on every report card. Gold stars on every paper. A pluses on every book report, even those I made up. And now I didn't know who I was. Mr. Nelson welcomed us into his office and we sat in 3 chairs facing his desk. He didn't yell or anything, not like Mrs. O'Connor. He just looked sad, like we'd personally let him down in some unforgivable way. He told us that we had been behaving in a way that wasn't worthy of the spiritual man that God had made, that we were a disappointment to God, and that we'd been doing things that normally only dogs do. Of course, a dog would never play Gumba because you have to have an opposable thumb. But his point was clear. As far as Mr. Nelson was concerned, we'd sunk about as low as a human being could go. And at Berkeley Hall School, just being human was already a strike against it. Then he made each of us call home right there in his office while he sat and watched us and tell our parents what we had been doing. Danny went first, then Donald, then my turn came. I couldn't even imagine how my mom would react. Now she'd have 2 kids in public school and everyone would know. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely dial the number, but I did. Granite 23443. I waited for the call to connect. It seemed like hours, like slow motion. And then, to my surprise and great relief, I heard the most beautiful sound, more beautiful than the voice of God, sweeter than a chorus of angels, purer than the music of the spheres, Mrs. Eddy. I heard a busy signal. And that's when I knew that God had not forsaken me after all. Mr. Nelson made me promise to tell my folks all about gumba, and I promised him that I would do that, but I knew I wouldn't, and they still don't know. I felt bad about that at the time, but now I don't mind it at all. I've had time to think about things, Mrs. Eddy. I've had time to think about how hard I tried to be spiritual and not human. And Mrs. Eddy, if I may say so, I've had it with you. I had it with apology and emotions and feelings, and yes, Mrs. Eddy, a penis. As gumba goes, I loved it. I think it was beautiful. I think it was an expression of the health and all time cited the scientific sense of being. There's great joy in being flawed and physical and mortal and animal and imperfect and yes, temporary. Maybe you should try it sometime. Because frankly, there is something very wrong right at the center of Berkeley Hall School, Mrs. Eddy. And that something is you. Goodbye, Mrs. Eddy, and good luck, your friend Mike. Oh, and P.S. We should all try to be more like dogs whenever possible. Because spiritually speaking, they're way ahead of us.
Oh, Mr. Mike Lambert, hooray! Yay! Yay! Oh, that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. Let me just ask, does the Twizzlers Company know what Davy did with that licorice? I just...
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know.
Twizzlers.
Yeah, all right, Twizzlers. I just wanted to know. And you know what? Sometimes I guess it's really good to have external sexual organs.
That's it, yes.
I wouldn't know that offhand, but I think probably it's a good thing for many of us. So thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Oh my, and you're right. You know, does God care? Jesus threw the money lenders out of the temple. I don't think like a good game of gamba, I don't think he'd care. I don't think he'd care at all. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lambert. We're gonna wrap up this wonderful show, which you've learned so much at. Think about what you've learned tonight. Think about what you can take home. Actually, you are home. Think about what you can do. I'm going to bring up somebody who is truly one of the most dynamic storytellers. Rick did a story salon in progress, well, I guess the year before last. And as always, we just like we're united in our adulation of him. He's pretty damn wonderful in every way. Mr. Rick Hall.
Thank you for your flattering intro, but I refuse to follow Michael Lambert. Gosh, he's funny and poignant. I was quite the Romeo in my younger days. I got my first kiss from a girl in second grade at recess. I met Carla Phillips behind the equipment shed and said, "Hey, Carla, let's kiss." And she said, "Sure." Romance was simple, and I was natural at it. When I was 10 years old, I sang Gary, Indiana in the community chorus fall concert. And after the show, I was surrounded by old ladies who thought I was the cutest thing in the world. And I was pretty cute. And I loved the attention, even if it was from a bunch of grandmas. But when I became a teenager, I was ready for something more than just a kiss behind the equipment shed or the adoration of a herd of blue hairs. I was ready to have a girlfriend. And at that age, we all understood that girls were attracted to guys who were tough, macho guys who played sports. I was short and pudgy. Sports were not my forte. Of course, later in life, I learned that girls really like guys who play guitars because guitar players get all the chicks. Unfortunately, I played trombone in the marching band. Idiot. The summer I turned 13, though, the Greene County 4-H office was sponsoring a county-wide trip to the St. Louis Zoo. So there'd be lots of kids, cute girls who didn't know my loser reputation. Because there wouldn't be kids just from my 4-H club, the Rockbridge Rural Rousers. No, I could meet girls from other clubs like Golden Grove and the Brushy Hustlers and the Merry Maidens, which, by the way, those are real names of 4-H clubs in Greene County, Illinois. Anyway, we drove in separate cars down to St. Louis and all met in the parking lot before we went into the zoo. And Larry Kuhn, our advisor for the county advisor, he told us, hey, you kids, don't just hang out with your own 4-H club. Mix it up. Meet some other kids. Oh, man. Yeah, I ditched the Rockbridge Rural Rousers like that. And I headed straight over to the Merry Maidens because guess what? The Merry Maidens were all girls. I introduced myself and I asked them, can I tag along? They said yes, because 4-Hers are friendly. And they didn't know that I couldn't do sports and I played the trombone. And so I was okay. But I knew sometime during the day, I was going to have to impress them or they might find out my true worth. We started at the primate section of the zoo. There was a crowd gathered around the cage of Bongo, the alpha male silverback of the troop. By the way, a pack of gorillas is called a troop. See, my story is also educational, it's all there. Bongo was alone in his enclosure because it turns out he'd been getting too aggressive with all the other gorillas in his troop. And the reason there was a crowd gathered around him because he was putting on a show. I stood on a park bench at the back of the crowd so I could see what was going on. Bongo was ticked off. He would go to the back of his cage and bang the metal door back there. It made a lot of noise, and the crowd would get all excited. And then he'd run around and swing from his tree and beat on his chest and roar, that thing. Okay. And the crowd, oh man, they were so excited. And that just made him even more mad. Then he ran to the front of the cage and jumped up on the bars. And this huge crowd of people, they all screamed. And by all of them, I mean, everybody, kids and girls, grown men, everybody screamed. I knew what I had to do. I told the Merry Maidens to follow me, and we made our way to the front of the crowd. And I got to that spot right where Bongo had jumped up on the bars, because I knew this is where the action would happen. Some of the Merry Maidens started to complain. They said, what are we doing here? I said, hang on, wait, it's worth it. Okay, I knew what would happen. Bongo would get all aggressive again and he'd charge to the front of the cage and he'd roar and he'd leap up on the bars and the whole crowd would jump back and scream. Everybody except me. Yeah, I'd be the one person who would stand my ground and not be afraid. And as I stood there, I imagined that I would hear somebody behind me go, oh, honey, look at that young man up there that almost has facial hair. Oh, he's so brave. And the Merry Maidens would fight over who got to walk with me at the zoo. My plan was foolproof, okay? And everything was happening on cue. Bongo, he started banging that metal door in the back of his cage. The crowd cheered. Then he ran around and he swung from the tree. And the crowd went crazy. And then he urinated on the floor and licked it up. And the crowd groaned. And that even made Bongo more mad. And he went to the back of the cage and he banged the door 2 more times. And he ran to the front of the cage. And at this point, for me, it all happened in slow motion. He took 3 big strides to the front of the cage. And then he leapt up on the bars. And the whole crowd, like one mass of people, just jumped back and screamed. Everybody except me. I leaned forward and Bongo looked down at me and our eyes met. And for a second, I thought, you know what? He respects me because I stood up to the alpha male. And then he puckered up and he spit urine and saliva all over me. He had pretty good aim for a gorilla. I didn't know what to do. I turned around to face the crowd, and I'm covered in animal juices, and everybody started laughing, including the merry maidens. And then some of the merry maidens took off into the crowd so they wouldn't be nobody would think they're with me, you know. And my first impulse was to run away and go hide. But then I started to laugh too because I thought, you know what? If I saw a dumb kid get hockered on by a gorilla, I'd laugh. That's funny. And everybody was laughing. And three or four of the girls stayed. And then Julie Reynolds pulled out some tissues. She had a little packet of tissues and she pulled them out and she handed them to me because a 4-H'er is always prepared.
Ah,
Said between her fits of laughter, she said, "Wipe yourself off. Oh, Ricky, you're so funny." Okay. I went to the bathroom, got cleaned up, and I came out, and the four girls at Julie Reynolds were waiting for me. Clearly, I had become the alpha male of my troop of merry maidens. And that's when I learned that, you know what? A lot of women like guys who play the guitar and athletes, but really, what girls are really looking for is a guy who can make them laugh.
Damn straight.
Rick Hall, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, Rick, please tell me that you and Bongo went on the road and did an act together.
No, but it was, I may be being a little poetic about the ending of that, but it was just like that.
Oh.
I got hockered on by an elephant. It was
By-
great. Or by a gorilla. I'm sorry.
But women also like men that they can take care of. So
Oh, there you go.
you brought out their maternal side.
Oh, maybe
Very
that's it. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
For me, it would have been. Between fits of laughter, it would have been. So.
In my experience, women just really like a man who is covered in gorilla fluids.
I've
Well,
always felt a little provocative
Uses.
about that.
That might be a chapter in the story you told about going up into the Hollywood Hills, Dylan. I don't know.
Well, you see, folks, this is why you come to the Story Salon, because, all right, you don't find out this information unless you were here. You got to find out about Greek mythology tonight, about Goomba, which I suggest everybody to try, whether you know the person or not. Just try it. You don't like it, that's one thing, but try it. You've got to find out about, oh God, I can't read my own handwriting, about licorice, provocative things you could do with licorice. You also got to find out things about, animal juices. All these things you can use this very evening. This is what the Story Salon does for you. We give you information so you can take it home and use it. Please don't show up next month and say, "Oh, I didn't do anything about the animal juices." Well, why not? Why do we do this stuff if not for you to use? So I want to thank everyone on the show. Thank you to Ellen Switkes. Thank you, Barry Segal. Thank you, Ashton Cynthia Clarke. Thank you, Dylan Brody. Thank you, Mike Lambert. And thank you, Rick Hall. Huge round of applause for everybody. And lest we forget, and sometimes I have, let us thank deeply and wonderfully Miss Amber Greenberg.
Amber.
And who is the dog? Who is the dog?
Who's the, oh, this is Mr. Scribbles.
Aw, Mr.
He's a
Scribbles.
sweet boy, yes. And again, the very best, like Mike Lambert said, the very best of our humanity is this dog. So I agree. Just a quick thing, you'll be finding out more about it. We will be meeting again. Lord Jesus, have mercy. We're just trying to figure out a date and some other stuff, but this will be happening like in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So be prepared, hunker down. In the meantime, we will do another Zoom show at the end of June. And I thank you all for coming. This has been a terrific, we have to do more shows like this. This has been a terrific show. Huge blessings to everybody. All right. Thank you all. Good night. Love and love.